Hi, welcome to Grateful Acres Farmstead. We're going to do a pantry restock today with some cornbread mix and a couple of seasonings. So let's get to it. We're going to start with the cornbread mix, and I can link the video that I did that also has the recipe in the description. We're going to start with 1 cup of flour. I tell you, when I have this stuff available, it makes me so happy. Because I don't have to get all the ingredients out every single time I do it. Or want cornbread. I can just add some water or some oil and water and be ready to go. This is 1 cup flour. And these are just some old pasta jars that I had sitting around, so I figured why not utilize them. The mix sits in there really well. Sorry, I'll try not to clank everything. This is a sweeter cornbread mix, so feel free to put less sugar in there if you don't care for it that sweet. Alright, we're going to add a cup of cornmeal. Hope I have enough to do all these. I'm in need of some more cornmeal. I think I might just get it. Well, that one's a little bit short, so when I get my next thing of cornmeal, I'll just add a little more to it. I don't remember it's the one with the label on it, so. And I'm going to put the sugar in last because I don't want the fine ingredients at the very top, like the baking powder and such. Alright, we're going to need 3½ teaspoons of baking powder. So I'm just going to do a heaping tablespoon. I'm going to need a teaspoon of salt. And the salt does taste better when you have a cute container that says Bunny Kisses. I'm also going to be doing some other mixes coming up. I'm thinking of doing like some cake and maybe some cookies. I'm not sure. Brownie mix, of course. Do you have a favorite mix? I'd love to hear yours in the comment, or if you've made cornbread mix before, how handy it is to have around. Alright, I am going to add milk powder and dehydrated egg powder. If you do not have these ingredients, then I will have the instructions on there for using just eggs and milk. Not a problem. I'll add water instead of milk. This milk powder is instant, but it's a very fine granule. Let me show you here. It takes 3 tablespoons. I'm going to put it in here so I can show you. Oops, that's not a tablespoon. So typically, instant milk is more of a granular, not so much of a powder. This is from Thrive Life, so I sold for them years and years ago. So, anyway, when you are getting milk powder, which they have one at Walmart that's an instant powder, you're going to want to make sure that you have enough for 1 cup of milk. So if it's a 1/4 cup of powder or whatever to a cup of water to make 1 cup of milk, that's what you'll need to do. So I think I have that on the instructions to make sure that you have 1 cup of milk. And then I'll need 2 tablespoons of egg powder. So if it's 2 eggs is what you would do if you're not using dehydrated eggs. Okay, now before I put the sugar in, I'm just going to tap on the bottom a little bit, and you can see how it kind of sinks all the ingredients down so that you have more room. It just filters it together. This will give me enough room to put my sugar in there. So if you can see where that starts, and then you just tap it with your... You're better to tap up than bring this down, because your ingredients can poof out better or more if you do it the other way. And I wouldn't tap it on the counter. That just makes for a big giant mess. All right. And then as for sugar, I need 2/3 cup of sugar. But again, if you don't like it that sweet, then don't worry about it. You could probably do a 1/3 cup of sugar. It's not going to make that big of a difference. That's going to fit in there nice. And then I can just add the rest of the cornmeal when I get it. It won't be a big deal. All right. And that's all you do. If you're wanting to seal them up with like your food saver, then of course the pasta lid won't work, or the pasta jars. When you go to make it, make sure that you pour it out in the bowl first and whisk it. Make sure you break up any clumps of it being in there in the jar, suctioned in. And that's it. All right, we'll be back in just a few minutes with the next recipe. Now we're going to make some taco seasoning. Now I make a lot of taco seasoning because I also use it for my Spanish rice. So I like to have it on hand and not have to get out every seasoning every time I want to make some. So the recipe I'm doing is for 12 times the original recipe, which is basically a packet of taco seasoning. So we're doing 3/4 cup of chili powder. Sorry, I'll try not to clang. And if you don't like it that spicy, then I would suggest trying it the first time for one recipe that I will link, and then changing that so that you kind of have it how you like it, or if it's too salty for you. Next is cumin, and that's a 1/2 cup. Now, I know a 1/4 cup seems like a lot of salt, however, it's a lot of seasoning, so still less salt than you would get in what you have at the store. All right. 1 tablespoon of pepper. Not very much pepper, but you really want to go off with the chili powder for your seasoning. A 1/4 cup of paprika. All right, 2 tablespoons of garlic powder. 2 tablespoons of onion powder. And if you want to put this like in a food processor or a blender and then incorporate it that way, that would work too. One thing that I have learned that I do not like about living in Missouri is the humidity. Lived in Colorado almost all my life, and then we moved to Missouri, and the humidity is bad. You just don't realize it. I mean, you still get humidity in here. So I try not to keep it in plastic if I can, depending on how fast I go through it, because it doesn't matter. Alright, and 2 tablespoons of oregano. And I like to kind of rub it between my fingers. I don't know if you can see that. Rub it between my fingers and break it up a little bit. You don't have to, but I like to do that. Like this. Alright. Always make sure you put your lids back on, so you know if your elbow happens to knock it off on the floor, you don't have that to clean up. Alright, I'm going to give it a good whisk. You could just shake it in your jar, but I have enough that it won't shake if I put it in this jar, so. Alright, put the fancy funnel in here. Alright, then I just have this fancy label that's a post-it note that way I can tape it on here, and when I'm ready for another jar, like when I clean this one out, then I'll just tape it to another jar. Write a whole new post-it note and everything. Alright, let's move on to the next mix. Alright, the next mix is country gravy mix. So you can use this for just regular gravy. I do chicken gravy or beef gravy, sausage gravy. I use it to make soup. All kinds of things you can do with it. Chicken pot pie filling. Alright, let's get to this one. Now you can double, triple this recipe. Depends, I guess, on how much you're going to use it. And I'm going to put it in this bowl first so I can mix it up. It's going to be your flour. Milk powder. And I'll write on the instructions because my milk powder is instant, however it's not granules. Can you see how fine of powder that is? So that's my instant milk powder. You will want something, you'll need to have the right amount of powder in there, so I will leave the measurements for that. You need some cornstarch. You're also going to need some pepper. And I can leave the measurements. I usually double mine, so I'll leave the regular single measurements, make it batch and try it, and if you don't like it that salty or that much pepper, then use less. This is onion powder, and then I have some garlic powder. Give this a little bit of a mix here. Or if you want to put it in the food processor and give it a couple of whirls, that would incorporate it really well. It's probably better than this, but it works just fine how I'm doing it. No use in dirtying a food processor. I can wash this out and then dry it really quickly, so it's easier for me to just use a bowl and a whisk. Alright, let's put the funnel in here. This recipe right here makes about 2.5 cups. And it will make quite a bit of mix because you're only going to use, depending on your recipe, but about 3 to 4 tablespoons on average. Alright. Got my fancy label on here that I'll just put a piece of packing tape on, and then when I change jars after this is gone and I clean it out, just put it on another jar.